So you may have noticed I haven't really covered much in the hacking scene around the Nintendo Switch, mostly because a lot of the stuff that's been happening has been very incremental and has mostly dealt more so with homebrew stuff and just programming in general, loading programs, running system level exploits at 3.0, and it's not really anything crazy. I did go over the 5.0 security update that Nintendo put out that would work to kind of stop, or at least put a stop to more hacking that could take place at a system software level. But today, major stuff has taken place. It's an exploit that I wasn't sure when it would be made public, but I'm not really sure why. So, for some reason, out of nowhere, Fail Overflow decided to make public that hardware exploit that, if you remember, Team Executor had been talking about. Oh, it's unpatchable, right? Fail Overflow did the same thing. They said it's unpatchable. Here's us running our little text line that goes across the screen, even on the later firmwares. It's not something they can patch out because it's an issue at a hardware level. And yeah, they told us how to do it. And what you're about to see is not a joke. It's so rudimentary, though, that a lot of people thought the Fail Overflow was just making a joke on Twitter and having fun. What they just showed people, though, is probably one of the simplest ways to trick the system and get it into a mode that then makes it vulnerable to running arbitrary code. So originally they had tweeted like a picture of a wire, and it was basically saying they're going to release a new product. This is our solderless way to hack into the Switch and not have to worry about firmware and everything. And then later they tweeted a picture of a 3D printed device that would basically slide into that right Joy-Con. If you remember, I talked to you guys about Fail Overflow's tweet a while ago where they showed something attached to that right Joy-Con that was then running up to, I assume, a USB or a computer or something. And that's kind of where we figured the entry point was right there. Well, getting into USB mode or RCM mode that lets you do things with the bootloader or the boot ROM is actually fairly simple. In fact, all you need to do is bridge pins 9 and 10. It's that easy. You seriously bridge those and a few button combinations on startup, and you're into a mode that can then technically be exploited, mostly because of the Tegra X1 having an exploit at a chip-based level. We've talked about heavily how the Switch pretty much uses a straight-up stock X1. Do you remember a while back they had that Programmers Summit where they were talking, Pluto and others were talking about how they figured out how to really get an exploit going for the X1. They just looked it up in the service manual, essentially, that NVIDIA provided developers, and they found it in there. And it's just because the Switch is running a very stock Tegra X1. And then from there, same day, ReSwitch has basically a payload that is a proof of concept. It's there to load up in the USB mode that the system is then tricked into starting up as. And it basically shows information from the Switch that you shouldn't be able to see, and that tells us that in that mode, other code can be run. So they can do a lot of stuff when you boot into that mode. And this is where it gets kind of worrisome, I guess, for Nintendo, because now a method that I can tell you guys has been making the rounds behind the scenes for, I would say, at least 3 or 4 months. They have been using this for a while to do all kinds of testing and stuff with other code. It's now public, and that's where things will start to accelerate, because as soon as the public knows that they can do this, you're going to have a lot of people playing around with this method, doing all kinds of programming, and this is where Nintendo's new revision comes into play. Do you remember how the T214 was talked about in the new firmware 5.0? It's going to be needed, and it's going to be needed in a hurry, because the idea with that is it's going to become a more customized, we assume, Tegra X1. It might not even really look as much like an X1 anymore. After that comes out, more than likely it would be a Tegra X1 with these exploits removed, because it is at a chip level. There's not much you can do with firmware. They are seriously playing around with the chip before really the firmware gets a chance to even load up and work any of the security measures that it has. That's why it's so dangerous at a hardware level, and there's not much Nintendo's going to be able to do about this unless they do a quiet revision, which I can tell you now, especially after this is public, is being accelerated even more so than before. In fact, I have a strong feeling with some of the rumors going on behind the scenes, we could see a T214 chipset in the Switch coming out as early as next month. Like seriously, it's going to be happening fast right now. If it already is worked into the firmware, you can expect it to start showing up on shelves pretty quick. Now, I didn't want to get too into the process or anything. Honestly, I was a little surprised by some of the mainstream sites that not only showed you essentially how to do it, but linked to every single resource you even need to do it. Like seriously, they link you to the how-to, they link you to the files. I was trying to be as vague as possible, but then you got big sites, even some big Nintendo sites actually showing you how to do it. I was a little surprised. So that's why I was like, you know what, I'll go ahead and we'll talk about it here on the channel because it seems like everyone mainstream's doing it. So the information's out there anyway. It's pretty easy to find. And really, now the question is, how will this affect the Switch? If I had to take a guess, most people, based on what I look through with the steps, are not going to do it. It sounds easy because you are shorting pins, but stop right there and think about some of the people who walk in and buy a Switch. Are they going to get a piece of copper wire and start shorting tiny little pins in there when most of them are concerned about even removing a screw out of the back? Probably not, especially since some of the other requirements you need go past just turning on your computer and plugging it in. There are a few other things you have to do, and I can tell you most people won't be doing it. However, it is easier than it was before, so you will probably have a higher percentage amount of people doing it, and honestly, there's no real firmware requirement that I can see right now. So what's going to happen is Switches that were purchased in the first year are going to have the ability to run this exploit, which in turn means that your Switch is probably, if you have a Switch right now, it's probably going to be worth something, honestly, in a couple years, much like how older PS3s with older firmware were worth more money for a while until recently when a new exploit came out. It's just the way it is. I remember PSP 1000s were worth something because a while ago when they went to the PSP 2000 because it was the only one that could be modded until the 2000 and 3000 were modded and hacked, but that system still sold 70 to 80 million units, so PSP was still kind of a success at least. The 3DS has been hacked like crazy and it's still a success, so I don't think this is going to heavily affect sales, okay? So don't worry about that. That's not going to happen, but Nintendo cannot leave this issue out there. You know, they can't. The concern is, can they detect this if people go online with really modded Switches, because then who knows what happens online. You could have pirated games being played online. You could have modders jump online and possibly ruin the online experience for people. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and more than likely Nintendo will have that figured out with their online service, much like how Microsoft has that figured out with Xbox Live, PlayStation. They can all detect hacked systems when they come online. I fully expect Nintendo to have security measures set up as well to eliminate systems, ban systems when they sign in online. Otherwise, it would be crazy. I mean, technically, they did this with 3DSs. When Pokemon Sun and Moon had pirated copies, they were able to just full-on ban 3DSs from its online service. So I feel like with the Switch being a paid online, that's probably doable as well. The other question, I guess, is from a production standpoint, whose fault, I guess, is this? Would this be NVIDIA's fault? Or would this be Nintendo's fault? Because technically, it's NVIDIA's chipset, their Tegra X1, just being completely stock that has that exploit that was put into the Switch. Obviously, it took out the ability to do the USB mode easily, but people still figured it out, probably after looking through the documents for it, even probing through the board to figure it out. But I wonder if it's more, and this is what you guys let me know down in the comments, would this be more Nintendo's fault or NVIDIA's fault? Because this is a big exploit that was left in this system. Seriously, I mean, the fact that they didn't even want to modify the X1 could mean that Nintendo wanted to just buy the X1 straight up because it was cheaper that way and we'll fix it later. Maybe people won't figure it out. Seems to be a massive underestimation on their part for the hacking community that is they're pretty tenacious. They're pretty serious when it comes to this stuff, and they figure out all these little things. Could it be, I'm trying to also wonder if it could be NVIDIA's fault, because that's all they had ready to go were stock Tegra X1s for the Switch. So I don't know. People are trying to figure out whose fault it would be. I guess if I had to look at it, oh man, it's so tough. I mean, it's NVIDIA's chip. They should have these exploits worked out before they give it to Nintendo to put in their system. I guess from a system manufacturer standpoint, Nintendo should have been more on NVIDIA about it, or at least asked more questions to figure it out. it's still NVIDIA's chip that's getting exploited, you know, to the moon and back here. Also, to finish it off, why not? Fail Overflow also showed Dolphin, the GameCube emulator, running on a Switch that they had there in handheld mode. So more than likely, as most people were suspecting in the comments there, more than likely they're running their Linux-based program that they showed before, their OS, and then they're probably running Dolphin on top of that. But who knows? Maybe they figured out a way just so it's just to load Dolphin up without the use of that. More than likely it has a Linux background though. But yeah, so there you go. GameCube Virtual Console may actually be a thing just from the hacking community. Hacking community is actually getting a lot more done now I think about it than Nintendo is. Backing up saves, bringing Virtual Console technically to it through emulation. I hope the online is good, because the online would be another deterrent for people when it comes to hacking their system. If you want to be online, can't hack your system. Oh, and the online's just awesome. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm not hacking my system then. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is it crazy to you that the exploit is this simple? Seriously. Bridging some pins, running some command line prompts, and boom, the Switch can then run code, the unsigned code that it shouldn't be able to. Is this, again, NVIDIA's fault more or Nintendo's fault? Maybe Nintendo should have screened it more. Maybe NVIDIA should have just fixed it before they actually put it into production and slapped it on these Switches. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'm very curious. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it, guys. Dislike it if you don't, and I'll see you guys next time.